February 17th, 2026 meeting of the Concord Transportation Advisory Council committee to order. And start with a roll call. Rebecca.
Here.
In the room, Mariana.
Here.
Phil.
Here.
Nick.
Here.
Myself. And Dan, you're online, right?
I'm here.
You there. Okay, great. We have a couple minutes to review, and in terms of who takes today's minutes, I know that Ellen did the most recent one, and before that Rebecca, and I think before that Phil. Do I have a volunteer to prepare minutes of today's meeting from anybody else?
I'll do it.
Okay, thank you very much, Nick. Okay, so who sets the minutes were distributed? Did people have a chance to look at them? So we can edit or approve, or do we want to kick that off to the next meeting, which is just in 2 weeks?
I did not look at them.
Okay. All right, let's
kick it off.
Let's kick it off to next week, and then hopefully we'll have 3 sets of minutes to review, and we'll make sure that people actually do that so we can keep up on a timely basis with meetings. So as far as chair remarks, the main thing there are 2 things I wanted to mention. One thing is I went to the Climate Action Committee meeting last Wednesday evening in the townhouse. By Zoom I was attending. The meeting was in the townhouse, and the town has hired a consultant, Weston and Sampson, to help the town and the Climate Action Committee prepare a new climate action and resilience plan for the town. Last one is dated 2020. If you search climate action plan on the town website, it will come up a page where there's a link to what it calls a dashboard, and the plan has these sort of 5 pillars: built environment, energy, mobility, natural resources, and preparedness. And mobility, if you go into that, it has essentially 3 categories: electrification of transportation, pedestrian and bicycle improvements, and public transit. So I just would urge members of TAC to take a look at that existing plan, especially the mobility section, and think about how TAC can, at some future meetings, discuss what inputs and suggestions we would like to make to the Climate Action Committee and to the consultants, Weston and Sampson, for inclusion in a new plan. The other thing I wanted to mention, and by the way, because we don't have a sustainability director at the present time, Deputy Town Manager Megan Zamuto is kind of the principal staff person involved, but ably assisted by Shannon McAndrew, who has been kind of the point person for information. And people should send to Shannon, I believe, any list of organizations, committees, departments, individuals, whatever that they think should be polled for input for the plan, so that we do a good job with that. And I did mention at the meeting that we do have all the work Stantec's been doing, engineering and planning wise, and the comprehensive plan and all this that should also be made available to the consultants putting together the mobility section of the new plan. I guess that's all the important things. So I would like to welcome Stantec consultants to present road safety project ranking process to us. And Alan Cathcart wanted to make an introductory introduction to that.
Yeah. Good morning, Alan Cathcart, Director of Concord Public Works. Just a quick introduction. I want to tell you what I think is important for you to know. Then we're going to have a presentation to reinforce what we think you should know. And hopefully this is also not just for TAC, but for the general public as well. We're following up on a process. If you recall, we had a joint meeting with the Select Board, Public Works Commission, and TAC a month or 2 ago to talk about these areas of interest. We're going to call them sort of activities that we've been receiving or requests over a number of years, and we've been compiling those requests, and we've heard loud and clear that the community is very interested in kind of understanding if we made a request, we'd like to know that it's been acknowledged and identified, and where does it stand? That was sort of one of the areas of interest. We also have $27.5 million that we're looking to spend over the next 5 years for road improvement and safety. 25 dedicated to improving pavement condition. That's a metric, PCI, that we are going to be held accountable for. That's 25 million, with $2.5 million identified for complementary ancillary safety improvements. It may not be pavement, but maybe intersection improvements, crosswalk improvements, some sidewalk, improvements, that sort of thing, signage. So this list that has been compiled by the traffic management group, TMG, is a staff. We've compiled this list, we've shared it and expanded it based on a charrette that the planning department had dealing with transportation interests. We've given it to Stantec, their engineering team, just so everybody understands. The town is fortunate where we've engaged Stantec engineers for engineering kind of work related, as well as Stantec's planning group who are supporting the transportation initiative, sort of, more broad, how do you get around town, connectivity, those sorts of things. So we have both groups, working collaboratively, working with the town, Public Works working very closely with planning, again, for that same nexus and interest. So what you're going to hear today is an update as to what Stantec has done with all these activities, all these inquiries, in a way to try and compile them so they can rank order them using objective criteria, more on an engineering sort of level. There is also input that the planning group has been provided to try and make sure the community that's been asking, expressing interest in pedestrian, cycling, sensitive communities, making sure that those are also on our radar. And so what we're going to be sharing is the result of Stantec's work, working with staff. We've also had a stakeholder group, including Paul Bohm from the Select Board, Mark Galis as the chair for TAC, and Andrea Solomon, who's the chair of Public Works, having more informal meetings to try and guide this process so we can try and deliver what we believe the community is asking for. So today you're going to get a preview of this tool that Stantec has developed, which will be used by staff, will be available to the community, will be available to TAC. It'll help identify, at least capture those past inquiries. The ranking is simply based to be objective. The tool, we hope, is something that as we get new information or new requests, we'll be able to use the same lens and sort of incorporate it into this master list. But to be very clear, it isn't a prioritization list of what projects we're going to do. That is where the community has more, say. The boards and committees with responsibility to represent the community's interests will also be able to weigh in. So when you're listening to this, just be cognizant that we're really describing the tool that is more objective than not. It's, there can be some, sort of questions, and I think we're here to answer, how does Stantec, what's this tool look like? How are we going to potentially, how will it inform the town? But also talk about the process of going from a request to a screening to potentially identified as a project and work. So Bill, I know Bill Scarpetti, who is the engineer from Stantec, is present. Liza Cohen is remote. He's available. I will ask one thing. Liza has a hard stop at 10:15. And because she is sort of the planning voice, I want to make sure that we can get
10
through.
o'clock.
What's that?
Sorry, Alan, 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock, okay. We'll move quickly. So what we want to do is make sure that as we go through the presentation, when we get to the planning side and some of those aspects, we may stop for questions and answers because Liza will be available and can kind of work with us. certainly staff, Bill will be here, for, more, questions and answers, as we proceed, but hopefully sets the table.
Yep.
And again, appreciate the stakeholder group with Mark, Andrea and Paul sort of helping staff, kind of work through this. So with that said, Bill, the table is yours.
I think Christine Zale will
Oh.
be sharing the presentation.
Yep, I'll just pull it up now and just please tell me when to move to the next slide.
Great.
Are you guys able to see the presentation?
Yeah.
Yes.
Now you just need to slideshow start.
Yeah, if you can expand it.
There we go.
All right. Well, thank you, Alan, for the introduction and nice to be here with that group. So, yep, Liza and I are here today to provide an update to the road safety ranking process. Walk you through a tool that we developed to help the town prioritize safety improvements in a structured and objective way. Next slide.
Just a second, it's not moving for me.
Here we go.
There you go. We see it.
Okay,
So just a little background. As Alan touched on, we are helping the town on really two parallel efforts, asset management and transportation planning. And our team's been working on the transportation strategy plan. And as part of that plan, we're identifying projects. We want to make sure that road safety improvement projects aren't happening in isolation, but they're part of a broader transportation plan, including the upcoming pavement management program. Continuing with the agenda here, we're going to jump into the overview of the workflow, where requests come from, and how the requests turn into projects and go through the system. 3 roadway safety projects, activity logs, and the financial constraints associated there. Number 4, review the ranking criteria and methodology, and then we'll open it up to questions, next steps. So next slide. So here's the overview. So request or public works activities, they come in, and they are being managed right now by us, compiled into a database. And where we have multiple, these requests come from various sources like Complete Streets, Safe Routes to Schools, Moms Out Front, Cut Through Streets. There's a current TMG list. It's a pretty long list. And there's multiple requests. And when we have that situation, we have one project that goes with those multiple requests. We rank the projects, and then collaboratively, the TMG traffic management group, which is comprised of the 4 department heads that you see there. If you circle, there's communication, bilateral communication with you all, the Transportation Advisory Committee, on reviewing those lists, and discussion points in that review include, ranked relative to other requests, the project cost, alignment with the transportation plan, funding that's out there available, grant opportunities, and other considerations. And then so as a project advances and is recommended, the TMG will make a project recommendation to the Public Works Commission, where final decision is made in concert with broader municipal priorities and goals. Next slide. So this ranking process that we develop is not something new. We develop similar tools for other communities. A good case in point is the town of Spencer. A comparable case where they appropriated $19 million for a 5-year roadway sidewalk safety improvement plan. They had a large backlog of work, and naturally trying to look for some non-biased, transparent, accountable way to try to rank the projects. And we used asset management data to inform that project implementation, so the projects were selected forward. Next slide. So let's look at where we stand today. We have 178 activities that have been compiled. They fall into 3 status categories. Active and complete, we have 134 open request activities. We have 20 that are active, ongoing. They can either be in design, planning, or under construction, and then 24 that have already been completed. Just some examples on those. You can see at the top an open request. There's a mid-block crossing request on Hayward Street where you've got 2 trails connecting to make a safe connection there. Another example of an open request is Kenny Dunn Square, realigning that configuration. On the active side, here you can see Baker Ave and Main Street. This is the project that's soon to be advertised for construction. Hopefully to start this summer and into the fall. Another active project is the Walden Street sidewalk that's under design from the police station down to the high school. And then complete, you can see Com Ave here. It's a good use of the Complete Streets grant. And certainly safety improvements to happen right downtown. Not too far from here, Manning Walden is another good example. So of the 134 open requests, we identified 106 prospective projects with a cost estimate of $27.3 million. As Alan alluded to earlier, the town has appropriated $2.5 million for safety improvements. So clearly there's a financial constraint here, so it makes prioritization essential. Next slide, please. So to develop a transparent and an accountability, we ranked 3 different criteria going to prioritization: infrastructure, people, and places. And the infrastructure has the largest emphasis. And that includes pavement condition, PCI scores, sidewalk conditions, SCI, and also the presence or absence of safety infrastructure surrounded by intersections. And now I'm going to turn it briefly over to my colleague Liza here to talk about just to touch on people.
Yeah, so can you go to the next slide, Christine? Or did you want to stay on this one? Yeah, so what's cool about this particular prioritization process is that, as Alan said at the beginning, the town had the opportunity to integrate some of the feedback that we received in the fall of 2023 into this prioritization process. So instead of it just being based on pavement condition, for example, we were able to incorporate some of this direct feedback from the community. So if you all can think back to the fall, we held a workshop in person, had great attendance, and then we also did a townwide survey with something like 400 responses. And so what we did was we combed through those survey responses, we combed through the feedback from the workshop, and we compared them to both the people and the places ranking criteria, and we're able to kind of layer that in. So, for example, we heard a lot from folks about wanting to be able to get to MBTA stations. We made sure that that was included in the places criteria in terms of spatial analysis. Also adding in to the people score particular roadway segments that we heard a lot about. You can see some of those listed on the right-hand side. So those are layered in to this prioritization process and can help inform decisions in the overall system. And happy to talk more about that, but that's the high-level summary. So I'll hand it back to Bill.
Looking at the schedule, we have 10 minutes with Liza. So do you want to sort of get into how?
Yeah, I think I can wrap it up in 5 minutes.
Okay,
and then
great.
we'll open it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next slide.
Next slide, please. Okay, so the town of Concord really is kind of ahead of the curve, believe it or not, with their GIS and technology, and we leverage their GIS to develop a online dashboard prioritization tool to help screen and find these projects, as shown here. And so this is a tool that the town has and it is getting ready to use. going back to the ranking scores, we normalize those ranking scores and then we establish what we call a weighted ratio or a composite score based on all three scores. And it takes into account 75% infrastructure, 25% people, 50% places. We applied that composite score to all the open projects. And then we produced a list of top ranked project candidates. And not as a decision, it's not a final decision list, but it's a strong starting point for the TMG and the TAC to discuss and deliberate and then ultimately decide what projects get selected. Next slide. So here you can see the top 25 projects, with the respective weighted scores. Each project has a cost to it. And then there's also the amount of times that the request came up that was tied to the project. So at the top of the list, that million, and I can't really see it that well, but it's $1.75 million. That's Penny Dunn Square. That's top of the list. The second one is the intersection of Main, Pine, and Church Street, redoing that intersection. The third one.
That was about 500,000.
That's 500.
Yeah, it's hard to read that, so if you
Yeah.
can say this, yeah.
Yeah, and then the third one is 300,000, and that's Sudbury, intersection of Sudbury and Stowe at the library. And then the next couple of them, you can see the relatively low cost, 5,000, 40, 30,000 moderate cost, we'll say. Those actually, a couple of those are tied to Laurel Street. But again, this is not, the list is not made to be final. It's a tool for discussion between TAC and the TMG. Next slide, please. Okay, so next steps, TAC and TMG will review the project rankings. And it's a two-pronged approach. One, identify medium to high project costs associated with those standalone larger capital projects that are going to have more of a long-term advancement in plans. And at the same time, we will also want to identify short-term, low-cost road safety improvement projects as part of the pavement management program. And this would include signage improvements, markings to reduce bike stress levels. We're not going to get stress levels down to perfect because of the right-of-way width and whatnot. But the idea is to reduce those levels, improve curb ramps and crosswalk throughout town, and then pilot some new traffic calming solutions like splitter islands, speed tables, and raised crosswalk. So once we get all these projects sort of identified, the goal is to establish a work plan, a 2-year work plan. It includes both the pavement management projects, the road safety project, to broadcast and communicate this plan to the public. So in closing, we've identified an activity log. There's a financial constraint, and you have a tool now to prioritize and start to look objectively at candidates and make decisions. And that's the end.
Thank you. Okay. So would TAC members like to ask questions? They'd like to.
Yeah, and I would focus, if you have some for Liza on the
Yeah.
people side of it, this is a good time to ask, so she can
Well, she's here.
respond, yeah.
For 5
Yeah,
minutes.
I would like something,
Go
I
ahead.
saw the infrastructure, people, places, and maybe I just missed it, but a little clearer I'd like to understand more clearly exactly what those mean and how,
And particular what Liza can.
so start with public.
Yeah. The people.
People.
People rather. Liza.
So the people score was based on input from the public meeting in 2023 and the survey, as I mentioned. And that input ran the gamut, right? People talked about their pain points moving around Concord. They talked about bigger picture things like places they'd want to get to more easily. And so this is overall a spatial analysis, right? So we were able to layer that in to the spatial analysis and understand like, okay, in this particular location, I think it's on the slide, There's an example, right? Like the library. A lot of folks mentioned the library and wanting to be able to get to the library more easily. So that wound up in the places assessment. People mentioned Route 2, of course, being able to cross Route 2. That pops up in sort of the overall people score as a place that might get weighted slightly higher. And so there's, I think, a very detailed methodology that assigns points based on all the myriad of criteria. This is just kind of a high level overview, but hopefully that helps clarify a little bit.
And what about the infrastructure? Something.
Any
Yeah.
more questions about the people? Ellen, were you?
Yeah, I
say
just
something?
wondered, I guess I'm hearing that if there was something that was mentioned a lot of times in the survey or in the charrette by folks, that it would pop up higher, thinking
Mhm.
about, I don't know, Cohasset or Kenny Dunn would probably be, or Route 2. How about corridors, the concept of a corridor from West Concord to Concord Center, to, Concord Center? How does that incorporate? In other words, you can do point solutions, but how about the safety of going from West Concord to Concord Center? How is that incorporated in your thinking?
So I think in terms of this particular tool, we tried to take a look at, you know, what those links would be, right? Because some people just said Main Street. So we didn't necessarily know which part of Main Street. But that, Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, got an extra 25 points because it kept coming up. I think more broadly, you're completely right. There's some bigger picture things that we are dealing with in the transportation strategy. I want to be able to get from West Concord to Concord Center. And there are a number of ways that you can do that. And we're going to try to help the town identify what those might be. And those might get folded back into this tool, right? As like, okay, now we've got 4 options. You could go along the Fitchburg line, you go along Main Street, you go along Elm Street. The town could use this tool to understand one aspect of how those different options compare to one another.
If I understand, it might be that that's part of the dialogue between, how to use this tool with the dialogue between TMG and TAC.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
How do these projects advance other
And also, what other things are,
desirable?
I saw traffic calming. How, it seems to me that, how do you think about the thought of testing traffic calming? How does that pop up in your prioritization? Like, okay, let's see if, forget what you meant, split various things, including, speed tables, speed bumps, or temporary or permanent. How does that fit into your thinking? In other words,
So
let's test something and see if it works.
yeah, so I'll take a stab at that, and then Alan and Bill might have a slightly different take, but I think that in terms of the tool itself, the tool is going to help identify areas of concern. It is not necessarily going to identify the solution, right? So the solution could run the gamut from full depth reconstruction for millions and millions of dollars to like, we're going to restripe this thing. And that's something that the town, why it has to be sort of a feedback loop because those have different costs and you only have so much money.
Yeah. It sounds like a really useful tool for dialogue.
Liza, hi, this is Dan.
Hi, Dan.
Hi, could you, as far as those public meetings, I know people were putting little Post-its up. Is the people piece of this weighted for multiple? I mean, I saw people putting up multiple tabs, and I'm wondering if that statistically kind of throws off the, validity of the importance to people.
I would say this is not a statistically valid exercise. You would need to have a much greater sample and what have you. So we did used our expertise in working with this type of data. And if there were things that kept coming up, those received some additional weight, right? Like we've heard from folks over and over again about, what was the example you just gave, Bill, that rose to the top? Monument Square, Kenny Dunn Square. Yeah. So like those two, just kept coming to the top. Those got weighted slightly higher than, the one person we heard from about Main Street. And that's the scoring criteria as of right now, right? Things are going to change, things are going to evolve. The town will kind of keep an eye on it, and that also needs to kind of fold into this overall process.
Thanks.
Rebecca, did you have any questions?
I do. First of all, thank you to Stantec for the presentation. I know it's a lot of work and appreciate the insights. My question really is about methodology, not just for Liza, but across the board. I feel I understand high level presentations, right? You're not in the weeds specifically because then that helps people get the overall picture. But for something like this that's so relevant for how the town, and I understand it's not the final decision, but it's still a very hefty weight of how the town is going to think about these problems. For me, I would really love to see something that is a deeper dive in the methodology. Something, for example, that might go into a write-up in a report or something like that that explains in much more detail. So are you guys planning to do that? Is that something that we could get a hold on, or what's the status of seeing that level of detail?
So you're saying beyond the PowerPoint, something that's
The appendix.
more.
Not a PowerPoint. I mean, it might be full disclosure. My background is technical, so for me, I really am very interested in a methodology that you might see, for example, in a methodology section of an article submission or something like that.
So I think the plan is to have a tool, again, that's objective, and a specialist is obviously going to look at it very different than John Q. Public, right? We know that. So I think what we would be doing is, working with Stantec to understand they're going to be kind of filtering, they've filtered all these activities in through a lens. That lens needs to be communicated to staff so we can replicate that, because we cannot continue to pay a consultant, or we'll have to make decisions if we want to every new ask or request. The idea is use the same lens, have it then get accounted for in that tool that everybody can see. But I think, Rebecca, in the weeds might be a conversation. You can come in and we can talk with you about it. I mean, I do this fairly regularly with experts, but it's not always sort of with a larger sort of
Excuse me,
public.
so
Yeah.
I'll have to hear from Phil and Mariana quick, while Liza's still hanging
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, and
So-
I have to hop in like 1 minute.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Quickly, could you explain how you conceive of how the public would observe the operation of the tool? Is this completely for internal
Okay,
use,
so-
or is it something that the public gets an insight into?
I think we can answer that question. Any other
Yeah.
last questions
Yeah.
for Live that might be, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. Thank you. This was
Just the
great.
question of, to what you're saying,
Yeah.
Ellen, in terms of tool. Is it, if we get additional information about what we think the people, places, infrastructure is, not the infrastructure, but
Yeah.
the people and places, is it possible to update the criteria or the weighting, like the 75, 50, 25, or any of the elements?
So without, Liza's gonna move on. I don't want to be rushed.
Okay.
He does have to move, but we can start having that conversation, and I think we'll be able to touch on that.
I want to respond to it.
Yeah,
Thanks, everyone. And
Thank you, Liza.
Alan,
Thank you, Liza.
as needed, happy to
Thank
follow
you,
up on
Thank
things.
you.
Thank you.
I
Thank
think if we want to move forward, we don't have to dig into the details of how those rankings were created. We now have a set of rankings and we can argue about where things are in that list.
Yeah.
Okay, we don't need to go back and understand exactly
No.
why is this one too higher than that one? Because ultimately, we're gonna have what amounts to a political discussion in town about which project goes ahead of which other project.
Okay.
So the fact is, we have the output of a tool. This really surprises me that I'm saying this, because I'm usually the one who holds out for lots of detailed understanding of exactly how something was put together. But I think that given what I've seen us doing over the last couple of years, and given what they've created here, I think it's good enough to now start a discussion in town about, well, is Kenny Dunn at the top of the list, or is this other one really the one that should be there?
Okay.
Can you go back to the
Just
slide?
a minute. Can you hold on one
Yeah.
second? Rebecca, you have your hand up for a little bit, and I just want, can you quickly add your comment in? Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
This is going to be a discussion now, right, Mark? So there's going to be, it's not like we're in a rush anymore. Is that correct?
No,
Yeah.
we're not in a rush. No.
Okay, perfect. So I wanted to respond because I think my concern about putting something out there that doesn't have clear explanation, my concern, it's true, my personal perspective and professional background is technical, but I think also the public is going to want to have a better grasp on what's going into this. And so to me, putting out something that continues to be vague and really sort of still feels like a black box. My concern is that that might still really frustrate a lot of the public who are looking for transparency. So it's true, you might not need the Rebecca Woodward level of methodology to go into a submitted paper. I probably overspoke that, and that's not a reasonable explanation. But my interest is not just from my perspective, but really holding on to transparency for the public so they know how the town is going to think about this. And at least for me, from what I've heard from the public, I don't feel like what we got in this presentation so far, it has reached that level of just being very clear. And that's my concern. I just wanted to follow up. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, I want to add my comment to that, which is I agree with Rebecca that some level of explanation of the methodology it might not be more than a couple of pages related to these particular categories would be very helpful because while staff, as Ellen is saying, can volunteer to sort of explain things, having one sort of standardized description of where we are right now with this tool in its stage of development will enable us and the public to more intelligently decide we really like that and think that's the right way to do it, or we need to change it this way or whatever. So having a little bit more clarity of the intention behind this, the methodology, it might be useful again, as was talked about with certain physical examples to sort of describe how this is used other places or whatever. In other words, where did this black box come from? And a little bit more like the reason the black box says this aspect is to accomplish this and this aspect to accomplish that.
Yeah, I would say that I would also, part of that, I don't think it's, you've said clearly it's not statistical, so can't go down the rabbit hole in terms of, pretending that it is. There's a lot of judgment here, but I would like to know in terms of the methodology, why 75, 50, 25 in terms of the different attributes. That would be, that would be.
I mean, something that speaks to that and.
Or maybe just take Kenny Dunn as an example.
Yeah.
Like, how did you get Kenny Dunn number one?
So let us go to, there's a process and then some of the specifics. If we can go back to the presentation, just to bring up that process slide early on, just to let people know where can the public, sort of, weigh in. Christine, can you put the presentation back up and get to the one of the first slides, I think was on, yeah, there you go. So if you can just enlarge that. Yes.
I totally agree with Ellen and Rebecca on this, and I think, like, my understanding is Stantec is developing this tool for the town to then own, right? And that might change and evolve over time with response to public input, but that's then going to be a tool that the town has ownership of, to refine those variables and share with the public.
Yeah, so when we look at this particular slide, we're looking at to the left, public requests, public works activities, other town department requests. That's kind of the bundle of information or activities. The ranking, what we're talking about, again, is the tool that is intended to be objective. And to Rebecca's point, and the rest, we want to make sure it is objective. And what we want to make sure isn't there's anyone's putting the thumb on the scale. That's not the intent. This tool, because it's objective, should be something we can replicate. Certainly the ask, and we're going to need to know this from Stantec because we don't want to pay them for every screen. We really want to understand how that, numerical, how the numbers are applied. So by doing that, we will have the information that TAC is asking, and we can kind of communicate that. At this point, this is their professional judgment based on experience and not Concord, but sort of independent what they've heard. So we will and should expect to get some sort of, a description of this ranking tool, and we can share that. I want to be very clear that it is a tool that just allows us to look at the activity order of magnitude, and you can even see with the bands, what they were assigned for people, place, and infrastructure. So that's objective, and I think anybody could look at that. But the real value is it highlights those areas of interest that the community needs to make decisions about. That's what you're talking about. When you talk about Main Street and someone says Main Street, we may look at the tool to say there are 5 activities along Main Street. Is this a time to look at them collectively? Can they be integrated into a roads improvement project now, but know that over the next 5 years, we might actually create this connection? And these are the things, that's a discussion. And that's where when you look at the public input and TAC, that's the feedback loop. And so when we have these conversations and we wanted a tool that we could start with.
Yeah.
The discussion on how do we apply it and use it remains to be seen, and as TAC is going to be at the table as part of that. And what I think you might find interesting is, Bill shared some slides that we said just too much. We're going to go into that rabbit hole for today. We have to be very careful and clear. Some of these things may be no-brainers. Some of these things may be something staff is saying, yes, we want to seize on this one. It's going to complement a roads program that's already been defined. I'm going to remind you, the road schedule is already set. The next 5 years, we have identified through modeling what pavement areas need to be improved. We're now going to look at this tool to say, okay, is there a connection? Is there an opportunity? If it's a $1.5 million opportunity, that's different than a $20,000 opportunity. Those are the things that will probably have TAC, involved in discussion. We have a budget, just like staff always has a budget. It's transparent, so everybody understands what the value is. And if the community, through TAC's voice, is adamant that they want to see certain things prioritized, that's great. That's the time to have it. Not by trying to, and I'm going to say this, and it's not any individual, not manipulating data into a ranking system. We're trying not to have it being manipulated. We're trying to have it objective. But I think the ask is very reasonable. Well, how is that sausage made? Staff also needs to know, and we expect we'll be getting that from Stantec, and we expect we'll be able to share that with TAC. The interest isn't to not be transparent. I think this, I would also say, is pretty exciting. When you look out there in the industry, we don't see a lot of models out there. Concord, again, is well ahead of the curve in trying to, 1, identify the need, 2, fund it. That funding at town meeting last year was huge. And then 3, the tool to actually implement. And so that's really, I think, it's very, I'd say progressive on the cutting edge. So the models don't exist, we're kind of creating it. But the feedback loop of the community is really important. And we think that's where TAC, even having TAC have a position, where it can be involved with the discussion is important.
Yeah, it's part of the what facilitates kind of what we got. So there are 2 things I want to mention, which I think are advantages, but while Bill and Alan are here, I want to hear them tell me whether I'm right or wrong about them. So one thing I see is that by having a tool like this that is location aware, it facilitates the matching up of projects with the maintenance program. Right?
That's right.
So that the links are based on, well, we're going to repave this road and redo the curbs and reset things and deal with all the sewer and electrical and other infrastructure. And at the same time, we can do this for safety or whatever, right? So is that true? That's an advantage of this.
One of the advantages.
I'm not saying the reason for the whole thing, but it's one of it does facilitate that.
It helps with the planning.
It helps with the plan. The second thing is that I take this as sort of a tool to handle dynamic input. So what I'm hearing is that, if today TAC gets an email that says somebody really wants action in a certain area for safety, it can be put into the list in some way, shape, or form. And as you said, some things will come off because staff says, wait a minute, that's easy to do, or whatever. So it's a it's a set tool that may be refined over time or adjusted, but what's even more dynamic is the set of inputs and outputs, right? So it's set up so that when people are saying, where should my request go? Well, at least we can tell the public it will go.
I want to be
And there
clear.
might be a pre-screen.
Yeah, so I want to be clear,
Am I right or wrong?
the ranking is not intended to be dynamic. It's established. And once something's ranked, everything is relative to it's gone through the same filter.
Mhm.
The prioritization is where you get into, are we going to put more juice into this particular project or activity? Because there's another need and other interest. An example could be grant opportunities, where there's a grant that really matches some of these projects.
Mm.
And it might be a discussion with TAC. Hey, there are these activities might be good examples. Staff might recommend X because of Y, but we can bring it to TAC to sort of vet that. We are now prepared. And the other thing with this funding, having the funding available makes us eligible for grants that we weren't and didn't use. Sometimes they're matching.
Mhm.
And oftentimes they're mid-budget cycle where the governor comes up with these. By having the funds available like we do, the project identified, which we do, it allows us to leverage that much better than most communities. So that's a real, opportunity. But I would say the ranking isn't going to be variable year after year after year. New activities can be screened, put into the list. And I think what's really important in the transparency aspect, which is not been clear to people, is they typically have an ask that's very pointed, one place, location, interest. It allows everybody, the community, to understand, well, yes, it's going to be part of a list. It's not the only activity. And you can look at the list and you can see what the town is up against as far as where are the resources, where do we want to spend them. And this is not necessarily, historically was concerned, why is staff choosing X, Y, Z? This gets away from that. Now there's a very clear reason why staff will be moving on some of these. And I will say, it's very important. We're getting into a construction season where, Steve, you're looking at how many miles of road you're about to do major improvements to? Joe?
Yeah. Well, 15 miles.
15 miles. Some of these things we will be looking at to say, how can we incorporate it? We don't want to do the construction and then say, oh, we missed this $30,000 opportunity. So I think this first cycle is going to be a little bit different. I think you're going to see some recommendations based on this tool that staff is going to make. It will share with the Public Works Commission. And I need to talk with Andre if we have a joint meeting where we could talk about, usually our roads program, there's not a lot of interest because where the roads we're doing. This one may have more interest because, well, how are we integrating some of these other things? We're not asking the public to tell us what roads need to be improved. We know that. But the public may want to weigh in on what are some of the other enhancements we want to do. And that's, I think, where we're very close to getting those initiatives sort of flagged and then sort of available for discussion. We have to be very careful. We don't do it the other Concord way of just dragging everything. Bill Scarpetti, as an engineer, says, you guys got projects you can do immediately.
Mhm.
And he's frustrated because we haven't had a chance to share that yet, because we've been talking about, making the sausage. Well, now we're going to have the sausage, and Bill knows already. He's already looked at it, go bang, bang, bang. He's going to be recommending to Steve Dukran, you should be considering this for your construction season coming up. And we will share those with the Public Works Commission as part of the roads overview. And I think we'll probably be looking at including TAC, with those, and ideally give you information before that meeting.
So maybe I didn't make my question clear, but
Sorry.
that's been, no, that's very helpful. That's very helpful. I guess what I'm saying is that obviously there are already a lot of projects in the list. And I guess what I'm saying is I think the public would like to know, if somebody comes up with an idea for a new project, where does that go? Does it go to a preliminary holding room that then at some cycle of time gets put into this ranking process? Or does somebody say, well, that already matches up with something in there? Because to me, it's the public input is a dynamic thing. We'll get
Yeah.
we'll get letters and things, and I think that part of the process needs to be defined too. You know, whatever the most practical recommendation is, because obviously you know, you can't be like creating a project then pulling it back because something flipped. There's an inertia.
That's right. So I would expect TMG will be the
Gathering.
receiver of these requests, so we
Right.
can either identify the fact that we know how the tool needs to be, the lens has to be applied, we can do it.
Mhm.
It can be put on the list. If we need support, we may reach out to Stantec because we're early in the process to get some guidance.
But at some point, a project would enter this ranking.
An activity enters the ranking,
Okay.
it's on the list,
Okay.
it's identified. The project is more of when is it something the town's gonna move forward on with design and construction, and
Okay.
it can vary. Or it may be a maintenance related activity,
Well,
which never really, you know.
For clarity with the public and
Mhm.
transparency, and also to, you know, facilitate public understanding of the methodology, et cetera. If we kind of define, you know, request is one thing, project is not, et cetera. We need to have a Concord specific terminology definition of things, and then where that comes in. That'd be mine.
Maybe one thing to talk about, I think the methodology, not to say we're gonna, I hear what you're saying, not change it, and re-rank everything.
Right.
But a frequently asked questions document
Mhm.
that explains, here's the methodologies, here's how we got the different rankings. Here's how we did 25, 50, 70,
Correct.
25, which I don't get.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
you know, and then to Mark's point, I think it's really important. I've got a new project. What do I do? Or there could be, I guess, another one they don't like to think about, but there could be a really tragic accident. How did that reprioritize stuff?
Well, that would be staff initiated.
Got it. Okay.
You know,
Right.
so staff still pays attention. Steve Dukran still drives around town seeing things that he doesn't share with anyone that are problems.
So Steve is another bullet.
Steve is.
Well, it's called, you hire professional staff, you should
Yes.
expect professional assessments. And you do that in Concord.
Absolutely. No, that's wonderful.
Mark?
Mariana, please.
So
No, and I get to that. Sorry, Dan.
a couple of things we a little glossed over. Can we go back to slide, well, can you go to slide 4? Did you see that?
Christine, can you put the presentation back up?
Because my next question is about cost, and I think you one thing that's really helpful here is that and maybe this is more engineering than planning, that you have rough cost estimates on all the different projects.
That's
And
right.
I think that's a step. Did the town provide that, or did Stantec come up with
Was it a combination, Bill? How did you get the costs that you've been using? And again, these are, you know, when you cost something, be clear, there's always conceptual cost. And then you get into preliminary costs and they get more and more refined, and you obviously have to put in some contingency
Right.
because of the uncertainties and unknowns. So these are all conceptual, but
Yeah, very
still,
conceptual
yeah.
order of magnitude of construction and engineering design cost, if it requires that. Some of these are like low hanging fruit that can, you know, be addressed through a pavement striping program and whatnot. But that's where the 27.5 million comes up for the 106 projects that we identified.
Yeah.
And again, there's only $2.5 million to appropriate, right? So there's a ranking in process, and sure, you can change that ranking process where you've seen the dashboard where there's sliders on that dashboard where you can go right to 0 with one ranking and 100 to the other. The list is not going to change that much. What you'll find in the ranking, but we do have, just to Rebecca's point, we do have an appendix that explains the you know, the ranking process in greater detail, and it's also part of you know, we are looking to hand the keys over at some point, like Alan said, and it's somewhat of an instruction guide.
Okay.
And then certainly when new information comes in, I kind of view it as a constituent request management system. So, you know, constituents are calling, requesting, and they're coming in, and they got to get flagged. They got to get tracked. Some of them are really maintenance related, a sign down, a crack, you know, sidewalk panel. They can be addressed by highway and grounds right away. The 106 we're looking at, these are really safety related requests that we're trying to, help you decide which ones you want to do. It's, as Alan said, I've been frustrated because I want to get the list to you and I want you to read the list. I want you to read what we, we identified a lot of short-term and long-term improvements. So, for example, there's the bridge, downtown Concord over, the river, it's very narrow. Right, so in order to get a bike lane or a sidewalk there, a good sidewalk width. That's a big project. It's a $3 million project.
New
Or
bridge, yeah.
we've identified some short-term, striping improvements, signage improvements to make it, safer in the interim. As we work towards that goal. And there's a bigger picture that's happening. With, which we haven't really talked about, but there's a lot of Route 2 MCI coordination behind the scenes, and it pulls into the corridors. So like Elm Street is a really great opportunity where we've got right of way, we've got pavement width. That really is, you come out of Concord and you come to the fork in the road and you see the state sign. You can either go 62 Elm Street.
Yeah, which is not the best.
62 is tough for bikes.
Yes.
But
very
Elm
tough.
Street is a great opportunity, and we're trying to get to that Baker Ave intersection, working with the state and get right over to West Concord.
Bill, I'm gonna just interject. You said the cost is basically because you are familiar, your team of engineers familiar with the probable cost for projects, so it's relative.
Yeah.
As far as the ranking does not include, it will capture costs, but the ranking isn't affected by cost.
Right.
That's
So,
more the prioritization that the town now has a tool to try and figure out, why aren't we moving quickly on this? It seems it ranks high and it's low cost. Why wouldn't we move on that? That'd be a discussion.
So Dan's,
sorry,
go ahead.
so yeah, I think adding those relative costs, even, at a very high level, is a huge factor in, the town, the TAC and the public understanding, why isn't my intersection getting rebuilt? I think, Christine, could you go back one? And I think we skipped over it initially. There's sort of a little workflow slide on the version.
I'm not sure, maybe this was sort of a draft that you may have had. I don't know if it's available, Bill. This is the one which was, I think, A and B, and one was prioritized. I don't know how that
It's only
translates.
letting me go to these slides in this order.
Can I go back to the project bar chart? I think it's, well.
The full,
Keep going. You got, that one right there. Yep.
So one question being, can you give us the list of which project is which, or is that something we
You
don't
don't
wanna
have,
put out?
at this point, it was just how the tool might be used to inform.
Is that gonna be for the next TAC meeting?
No, actually what we'll have is we're basically gonna, part of the deliverable is we've touted a lot of things and we're still kind of, we've a lot of work behind the scene, but there will be this information available on, the town website.
Okay.
So you can see the activity identified. It's a GIS based, tool. Bill, can you describe that a little bit? I mean, I think there was an image of it, but I'm not sure we've really.
Here, I
before-
finished my question.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah, I
one.
want to
Yeah.
take a couple other
Yeah.
questions and then we can go to Bill, but.
Yeah.
finish.
Yeah, so my last point on this was, I guess I'm surprised that the number on the left-hand side, if you can't read that, that's the request count.
Request count is 3, 1, 5. Yeah.
1, 2, 3, and
Yeah.
a 5. I'm just surprised that those numbers aren't higher,
Oh.
based on having looked at the data. And seen like dozens of requests for some things.
Mhm.
So I was just wondering if this is just an example, or if this is kind of a model for what we'll kind of come up with at the completion of developing this.
This is the live data. This is the top 25 projects. There's 106 projects. This list represents $15.1 million. Again, you have $2.5 million. This is kind of the top that you can start with, but you can certainly look at the remainder of the list, and down the bottom of that list, you will probably find requests, project with a higher number of requests.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and
Yeah,
that's
I'm
very
sure it's
interesting.
more than
Yeah.
5 people mentioned the
Yeah,
library.
so that is a separate, that number of requests is what comes from what? from the public forum, or is it from department?
No, the request, the specific request in the database in the
Okay,
Excel.
so basically, you're talking about, it kind of was duplicated 3 times as separate requests.
It
So
could have
it's
been.
not, it's
It
not
could
a,
have
it's
been.
not a measurement of how many people want it, it's something.
Yeah, that's what I think is not clear. What does
Yeah.
it mean then? I do.
Yeah, what does the 3 mean versus a 1? What
And
does the 3 mean
Maybe
versus a 1?
does a human have to go through there and be like, okay, well, the library was mentioned in like 17 different ways, but those are all asking for the same project.
Right, so the library mentioned in different ways that was incorporated and layered into the people score.
Okay.
Which isn't the same as that.
Yeah.
The count of requests are the number of requests in the Excel database management tool. And
Okay.
as Mark said, there could have been some that have already been combined previous to us getting the data, but we took there was Complete Streets, Mothers Out Front, we combined it
Yeah,
all together.
so what I mean, it's large bucket, there were 3 large buckets that had this.
Yeah, so what I'm
Thing in it.
talking about is picked up in the people's one.
So, Dan,
So the people
Yeah.
score, just use the colors, right?
yeah, is the.
This is the people score relative to, something with a smaller number,
Yeah,
for the people
library is
score.
the third one.
Okay.
Library is here, so the people score is pretty significant, more so.
So the thing on the left is not a people score, that's
Correct.
probably separate. So,
Correct.
Well, except you do have, with the one that has a 5 for the request count, it's got a smaller people score than the top one, which has a 3.
yeah, the numbers on the, I think we should ignore the numbers on the left. We'll come back to this clarification.
I did have, Mark, I
Yeah.
had a
Go
two-part
ahead.
question as far as, Alan, as far as the safety, as far as the allocation goes, is roughly 10% of the total. How does that get allocated? Number one, I mean, if you have a project where safety is a piece of it, how do you have a small number for safety, but a bigger number for infrastructure effectively? But does that play into the weighting of the score as well in terms of it being a bigger safety concern, and where would that fit in the bar chart?
Good question, Dan. First, I'm gonna just paraphrase Aaron McCloskey, our highway ground superintendent, who every time we meet reminds us every one of these is safety related, everything we do. However, when it gets to Bill, the criteria in safety, can you describe how Stantec incorporated that?
We did an assessment, looked at pavement, sidewalks, intersections, where there was missing safety infrastructure improvements related to the sidewalks or the intersection, the curb ramps, the crosswalks, that was incorporated into the infrastructure score. So as far as the safety condition assessment, that's in the infrastructure score. Certainly, people could have complained about a safety issue at this intersection, and that would have been layered in and captured under the people.
Okay, so that's like a professional safety assessment weight. So-
And then, Alan, in terms of the actual budgetary aspects of this, I mean, how do you parse it so that we're not spending, safety money is pretty small in this allocation. How do you allocate it so we don't overspend our safety piece of it, while taking care of the safety issues?
Agreed. And again, the road condition is a safety issue. So that's 25 million. However, the 2.5 million is, Dan, that is the question of the hour. It's identifying what the needs are, which we're trying to do in a very transparent way, working with the community in TAC, we'll have a voice on that. And like any project, we'll all kind of have the responsibility of owning, the budget management. Obviously, if TAC is demanding a project that's $2.5 million, then understand that that's the bank. And we need to have that conversation. And I think the other opportunity is if we can get some early wins, as Bill and Steve would like to see this construction season, what it's going to do is hopefully allow people to understand the value of this investment. And maybe in the future, we can start prioritizing certain projects that will go outside of that funding to say, no, we really want to go ask the town meeting for this Kenny Dunn Square. We know we can't do it under the 2.5, but we want to prioritize it. That could be a separate town meeting request, for instance.
That makes sense. Rebecca's got her hand up. Rebecca, if you'd hold on 1 second, I just want to go back and check something with Bill about the numbers on the left. Is it correct to say that the numbers on the left are the number of independent input databases that were combined here? In other words, if it was a Mothers Out Front list, it was one of the Charette Public Workshops request, and it was also in the Complete Streets list, then it would get a 3. Is that what? Okay, so I just,
Okay.
that's
correct.
okay. I just want to make sure people know that that's what that is. Okay, go ahead, Rebecca, please.
Thanks, Mark. So I've got something in my head and I'm going to try to explain it, but so we'll see if it comes out muddled or not. I think part of what's making me stuck on this is when I think of a tool, I think of something that can be used not just at a point in time, but something that we use going forward. So for example, something designed by Stantec, so that when new projects come up, you can use a tool to at least have an internal, as you say, hopefully unbiased assessment of them. But in what we're looking at, there are pieces of this that the town's not going to have access to for new projects. So for example, the people piece is based on town forums that we are not going to hold over and over again, right? So in my mind, this is less a tool for going forward, but more an assessment based on Stantec's data at this point in time and their expertise to give their best evaluation of where current projects stand. And I think, Alan, does that make sense to you, or how would you respond to that? Because I think it's the concern about calling this a tool that's confusing me, given that there's some of these inputs we're not going to have.
It's a great point, Rebecca.
Bill, you want to try and?
Yeah, right, you're right, that people score was a snapshot in time, and the idea is to, as constituents come forward, and there's more, those requests would certainly come in, those older people scores would be applied, but there could be new forms as part of the transportation strategy plan, the ongoing plan and initiatives that could be incorporated. As part of the people score, there's also a second piece, which it'll be outlined in the appendix, which looks at census data and where the disabled population lives in town, and then there's been a low, medium, and high prioritization that was placed on that. But yeah, it's intended. My thought is intended to be a dynamic score. So the more information you do, the more condition assessments you do, the more important places that are built, and more public input that would get integrated into this. And so when new requests come in, those new rankings would be applied. That's one way to go about it.
Can you imagine TAC could now be a screen or filter of the people side of it? Because what we're dealing with certain asks that are one of that staff may have received that may be sort of off and the remote part of Concord, but for that particular citizen, it's important. So it doesn't have an echo. There's just one ask. There could be the same situation, 2 parts of town, where there is an active neighborhood and an inactive neighborhood. And I think that's also going to be realities. Again, this is, when Rebecca used the word tool, it's not the be all and end all. This isn't the prioritization tool. I think it is is objective a ranking system as we can agree to, knowing, it's going to be, is it a horse by committee? Potentially, but it's got to have 4, legs and hooves and that's what we're talking about. So let's not, my concern is, and I've been in Concord over 30 years, we analyze things to the 11th degree and not move on action. And this is really, I'm excited because I think it gives us a transparent list of activities that people can have a discussion on. And I'm going to suggest engineering, highway grounds, police are going to sit down and look at this list once it's gone through to help start looking at what are the roads program, what should we be moving on, what should be our recommendation this first year, knowing we want to be mindful that we're looking at, and if we $500,000 is probably a reasonable not to exceed for the first year. Why? Because that's 1/5 of a 5-year program. One could argue, don't spend anything. I'd say that'd be foolish. You could do that. Staff is only going to try and do things, professional recommendations, but obviously we now have Public Works Commission and TAC who can be at the table as generally a sounding board to say, yeah, it makes sense, but not to orchestrate every specific task. Because when we're there, we don't need professional staff, we need professional committees.
Mhm.
Yeah, and maybe in conjunction with this, we need some kind of an ongoing public, well, you know, I know we have
Yeah.
a forum, but you know, maybe there's some way to have kind of an ongoing open forum online. Where, you know, stuff can be posted, folks can comment, you know, find a way to, you know, maybe they have to identify themselves, so you're not like.
Yeah.
Trying to break the
But
scales.
we do, I
but
mean,
to
we do have
replicate that.
on the back page place for people to write in requests, and I don't know if Public Works has such a thing.
Yeah, we have the same, but I do
But we
think this
should
group,
figure how to pull those.
we've talked with Mark and and Paul and Andrea on, you know, how often, you know, and right now we're trying to meet a lot of deadlines. But moving forward, we should look at our roads program, year 2. We should look at this list, start trying to figure out what might make sense, and probably have at least 1 or 2 meetings a year where we can vet it and have that discussion. Regrettably, this year is just a lot of activity, a lot of interest, a lot of pent up, you know, desire, but we do want to move on it. We'd hate to be not making some real investments over the next construction season. But knowing this is our tool and this is part of the process, we want to work with TAC to figure out how many meetings a year is appropriate and when. And we got to, you know, phase it based on building a budget, town meeting schedule. Those are the 2 most critical, you know, paths. And we know we can predict those. And I think we just need to work with, you know, I'll work with Lisa and TAC to figure out what's the right kind of communication. So it makes sense and it's comprehensive and it gives everybody that opportunity to have their voice
Okay,
heard.
so to make that, well, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, it sounds like, you know, one thing is not in that graph is the feedback to the public. You know, it's gonna be transparent, so,
Yeah, the TAC was back and forth.
Be posted.
Yeah.
no, between TMG and the TAC that's back and forth.
Oh, yeah,
Public's input
okay, yeah,
feedback.
maybe
And so
that,
it seems like one of the things that you're talking about that strikes me could be interesting is a public meeting, you know, not this year, because it sounds like you're gonna be running fast.
well, no, there'll be a public meeting for
but-
the roads program. I think we
Yeah,
might
but I mean, a
figure
public
out.
meeting in which people can ask questions about why not
Exactly.
this?
Yes,
So that it's, you know, you can be transparent.
yeah,
And then you can be overwhelmed.
that's right.
Because it's too much data, and so we specifically want to know why, is this particular project, with this particular issue not being addressed? That can be the public can be a bi-directional feedback by some kind of a form. It's like you're
Yes,
doing this
yeah.
for rec in some way.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that
yeah.
I think would be really, really useful, because I can see TAC, or at least myself, getting overwhelmed with a
Mhm.
lot of, you know, why this, why that?
Yes.
Yeah, but I mean, we can have public meetings specifically for it, or public forum, or whatever. Go ahead, Phil.
So one thing that occurs to me to make this maybe more tangible for people is to have like milestones that you're going to publicize to the public. So I think every year you have a roads program presentation at the Public Works Commission in November, right? Is that, I think that's.
That's the start, yeah, that's the
So-
beginning of, yeah.
Right, so maybe that's a milestone where you
Exactly.
can say to the public,
Mhm.
at least for this year,
Mhm.
not only are we gonna use that as an opportunity to talk about what we're gonna do next year, but maybe you use it as an opportunity to evaluate how you did over the course of this, you know, this coming year,
Mhm.
over
Yeah.
the next, 6 months. So
Right.
you see how well is the tool working?
Yeah.
How well is the communication working? And it's a very tangible thing for people to know it's on the calendar and they can, prepare for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I, have a question. Is it possible to go back to the slide with all the horizontal bars and colors. So again, to sort of, this is at a high level because we don't have everything identified there and there may be other factors besides constraints besides the dollar amount in terms of time to implement and et cetera, et cetera. But to test out the idea of how staff or TAC or Public Works would make a selection along the lines of what Alan is saying, recommending that, if I might put it that way, we might as well try to spend $500,000, not way more, not way less, the first year, if we can. When I look at the, and setting aside the non-statistical nature of the orange bars, when I look at this chart, there are 4 very large orange bars. One at the top, which is a very expensive project, which ranks high in the other attributes, Kenny Dunn Square. And then low down, there are 3 of them, of which one of them is a $4 million project, but the other 2 are 50 and 30.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering about just kind of talking this through, how staff and TAC and Public Works would and consultants would approach a kind of a mixed strategy of saying, let's make sure if possible we include some high people score items in the first year list. You know what I'm saying? So I'm sort of just throwing this out there. Is that something being thought about, or
Yes.
And what is TAC's responsibility in that process?
So
No responsibility or
participation,
keeping our eyes on the ball?
and let's understand, it may not be perfect, but we really are on the right track, and we may learn a little bit this cycle because it's a little bit more rushed. But I do think, we're gonna be looking at those. Bill probably has some pretty good ideas. The engineering division, as they look at the roads program, will start looking at where do these things potentially fit in. And I think part of these may be when we get this compiled in release so that TAC can look at it. I'm sure there's gonna be some back and forth discussions on those details.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
and
opportunity
that's the
for
goal.
direct public input.
Correct. Well,
Opportunity.
and the direct public input, I want to be very clear, TAC has a very important role because the community's concerned that somehow decisions are being made and, whatever, it's the
Or
engineer
not being
focused
made.
on, or not being
Well,
made.
let me say also,
Please, yeah.
TAC has that concern too,
Yeah,
that it will not be heard early enough in the process.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah,
So I think it's important. I understand engineering has to do a first level look at anything to figure out what's possible and what the rough cost would be and the implications for schedules and all, right? But TAC has to get involved pretty soon after that.
To avoid the mystery, is it possible we could be looking at a joint meeting,
Yeah.
Andrea, where it allows the TAC and Public Works to be at the same table, knowing that in a perfect world, as Phil said, the discussion probably wouldn't have been November. It might have been in the spring there was something, and November is when we're looking at budgets, because we might be really trying to advocate or champion for a very large project that should be standalone for town meeting. So there'll probably be a few times in the yearly cycle where it makes sense. This is going to be unusual, but I really want to prevent us getting the paralysis by analysis coming up. But I think someone just pointed out some pretty obvious, we should be looking at this top 25 anyway. Doesn't mean we can't look at some of the others too.
Right.
But we probably are looking at an allowance of about $500,000 to say, what's the best value? And that's a discussion.
Okay.
Can you conceptually what those top couple were that you mentioned?
The first one is Kenny Dunn Square. The second one is Main Street, the intersection of Main Church and Pine. This third one is the Stowe Sudbury across from the library. And the fourth one is it's $5,000.
The fourth is almost $1 million.
Yeah.
And then the fifth is 5,000, the sixth is 30. So one of the, we debated what, and Bill really liked this tool. We had a discussion on, is it too much? I think it's too much, quite honestly. It's
But
a
you're missing-
tool
you're
that we
missing
can
the
use.
projects, you know, which is a critical piece of information, and that's. There's a lot of cool data here, right? Like, it could influence you one way or the other, but the
Yeah.
point is we're getting the data into your hands so that you can make the best decisions. You know, as an asset manager, my approach and just to reiterate the recommendations again, it's a two-pronged approach. You want to look at this list and you're trying to identify these sort of mid to high range projects. The Kenny Dunn squares, the you know, the 300, 400, 500,000 and up, and really kind of put them in a long-term plan. Where do
Yes.
you know, where do we
Yes.
want these? Is it in the first 5 years? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't,
Mhm.
right? And it just has to go through engineering, but at least get that on the list. And then the second part is you're gonna try to maximize the pavement management program. You're out there, you're doing work, you're you know, resurfacing. There's opportunities, but at low cost, you know, lower cost from $25,000-$30,000 down. Those are ones that you can inject into that pavement management program. Piggyback off of some of those funding. It may not all be there, but it's twofold of an approach. That's
Yeah.
really.
So I want to just say that I really appreciate your expertise and hard work in terms of getting this all on the table so we can have these productive discussions.
One thing I don't see or haven't heard is if we were get to the point where we're looking at a list and trying to figure out which ones to do. I haven't heard where there's a quantification of safety, like which
Wow.
of them have the biggest positive
That's an interesting
impact
question.
on safety? Right? If that information isn't available to us when we sit down at the table to rank them, to do the final ranking.
Well,
What are you gonna
that's
turn around and tell the
that's
residents?
the request.
Or
That
like
is there a way? Is there a way?
You know,
to-
I would appreciate Stantec's, for instance, Stantec's professional opinion on which of those projects, what the safety impact of the project is, right? You know, which ones are putting the public, pedestrians, drivers, bicyclists, which ones are collectively putting the public at most risk?
I think some of that's embedded in the weighting, but it might be
Embedded
worthwhile
is-
in terms of also methodology
I think there has to-
describing
Yeah.
whether there's another pass at that.
Ultimately, if we know we're doing the ones in the first year that, given the safety has been
Yeah.
the banner everyone's flying,
Mhm.
I think we have to answer that question and make sure we're doing mostly projects that impact
Okay.
safety.
So if there isn't any strong objection, I want to try to tie up this topic. It's getting a little late in the morning. I don't know if people have if anybody on the tech objects to that. I would like to know what follow-up is coming from this particular issue and from Stantec for our next meeting, which is in just 2 weeks. Will there be more specific project linked information, or is that too, you know, because I heard some things when we had the sort of group meeting about fast pace on this, and I don't know what the pace is
Yeah, I
for
think the pace
identifying project, but
we're looking at is get projects out to bid fairly soon. I think we're talking about Steve, March, maybe Public Works, where we're gonna talk roads and maybe integrate some of the recommendations from, you know, we now want the data from, we want the list, we want Stantec to complete this work. Now, there can be, you know, part of the discussion, we may have to go back to the well, but quite honestly, we gotta get off the Goldilocks. We're not gonna have the perfect thing. There may be some iterative improvements over time, but right now, I think we want to go with what Stantec's recommendations are, provide a general overview of what the process is. I volunteered for Rebecca. I have no problem inviting her in to talk with us as we're trying to understand this tool. Staff still doesn't have the keys to this car. So over the next month, we're going to try and understand the more granular information that goes into this, have a list that's available to the general public as far as these are all the activities. And hopefully have a meeting where we can discuss potential construction, probable construction recommendations from engineering. At the March meeting, that could be a joint meeting, and there can be some dialogue. And at that point, TAC would have seen the list. The general public will have seen the list, and we can have some back and forth as far as the what and why.
So as far as
That's how I see it.
I would like to see today's presentation posted on the TAC webpage.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Today's document. Yeah.
Take public comment, because I know there's two people that have some comment.
Yeah.
Sure, then we got one online. Okay, if people limit themselves to 2 minutes, I would take some public comments. Anybody? Please go ahead.
Josh Burgle.
Hi, Josh. Go ahead.
39 East Circle. I have so many questions and comments, but I'll limit it to 2 minutes. First, comment is the plan doesn't include any sort of policy influence. So I know that we have a complete street policy in Concord, and I don't see that coming into the ranking. So I think that's an important piece that needs to be included. Second, is that the tool doesn't have a feedback loop to it, so there's no way to learn. It dies at a TAC or a recommendation from PWC, and that's it. It doesn't go to built or feedback from built to how to tune the tool even better. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay.
I hear the question, yeah.
And then finally, Alan, you talked about getting early wins on the 15 miles of paving. And Phil, you talked about trying to get some influence from TAC and recommendation on projects like that. But I haven't seen those drawings. We have no idea. We have a pretty picture that shows what roads are gonna be paved this year, but we don't have any of the details. So there's no way for TAC to have had a chance to see that and provide some input, maybe from a mobility perspective. So when are those can be seen? Those are my 3.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for keeping it short. So online, Linda Neiman.
Hi, thank you. I feel like there's two concerns. One is like, I understand Alan and his crew want to get started and they're tired of waiting. I feel like this list is kind of like a very static list, and it's not really meant as a process to go forward. As Nick pointed out, like the main concern of residents is safety, and it's really kind of buried in here, and I don't really know where is that listed, and also where is the feedback from residents when a solution is proposed. How can residents, provide feedback? I also, maybe not this list, but moving forward, a lot of this seems very heavy on the total cost of a project. I mean, I think we really want to be more safety based and attack those and triage the immediate safety concerns, and then follow up with connectivity as a second priority along with safety, and then put that as a priority list. And then a secondary concern should be the cost, because we can go for grants later and we can do short-term solutions as other people have suggested. So again, I feel like this list is very static and based on the current constraints and not really something for like a process going forward. I guess my question would be, like, based on this current list that has been produced by Stantec, and they put a lot of effort into it, and I acknowledge that, how has that changed Public Works' prior list of work? Has it like moved things around a little bit? Has it made an impact? Thanks.
Thank you very much. In the room, Tanya,
Yeah, just
identify yourself, I guess.
Hi.
We know who that.
Tanya Gable, 62 Prescott Road. Just two quick comments. One is I really like Mariana's idea of having a forum where people identify themselves and express their opinions, and also where they are from. And relatedly, when Liza talked about the survey, she called it a townwide survey. I want to underline that that survey was open to anyone. So there was, I'm sure there was input from outside of Concord, and the preferences of certain interests outside of Concord should be taken into account when evaluating the survey results. Thanks.
Thank you. Any more public comments? Paul, do you want to make a comment, or we have a couple more, we have something else on the agenda?
Yeah, just very quickly, I'm a glass half full guy, and I think what I'm hearing is very exciting. We've been talking about moving on this for a while, and I see real movement. I think if you watch the recording of this meeting, you will see every opportunity, every challenge discussed. And, you know, there's a lot of work to do moving this forward, especially on the TAC end of things. And you talked about, what is the process of getting the public input into the process? And of course, the challenge is what do we do this year versus what do we do in the future? And I think, Rebecca, you hit on the issue of, is this a sustainable process or is it static? I think you need to talk about how to make it sustainable, and that people input could come in future projects from TAC or from the public. So I think that it's very exciting that you're moving forward with a ranking system. That's a start. It's not the end. It needs to probably be modified. And I think TAC really needs to figure out the public input part of that. Using this ranking as a start. But I'm very excited about what collectively Stantec has done, what the group has done, and moving forward. I can report the select board that we're actually moving forward.
Yes, that is helpful. So thank you very much, Bill. You're very welcome to stick around for a little bit longer if people are willing. I mean, if somebody really needs to go, or we lose the quorum, or wants to end the meeting. So moving on, Alyssa, do you have any updates regarding the comprehensive phone or public transit or any other exciting thing?
Sure. Yeah, so Liza and the Stantec planning team have been working on the comprehensive transportation strategy report. We are on track to be finished with that likely May this year. And we do have it on our list to have a final presentation of the plan to TAC. And kind of wanted to touch base with you all on that. We have, I think it's worked fairly well to have Stantec present during your scheduled TAC meetings. So was thinking about doing that. We did float the idea of maybe having, because this is a wide ranging kind of long-term transportation plan document, of whether it makes sense to incorporate or have attendance of, if, you know, select board. Do we invite the select board to a TAC meeting? Public Works, I guess, commission you could consider as well. But just kind of wanted to float that out there. I know a couple dates coming up. You have TAC meetings on April 14th and May 5th. Those are, you know, potentially we could have Stantec come and present on either of those dates. And just kind of wanted to get your thoughts about how you see it best to incorporate like other boards, committees, or if you would, you know, kind of like it to be a more kind of TAC and public presentation. So,
well, I guess there's one constraint, is it costs money to have Stantec come and present. So there's an advantage to doing it with all parties with once, I think.
yeah, we only have that.
But if
so.
there is if there is a draft document or any other material that TAC would have in advance of a TAC meeting, for TAC to review at the meeting with questions and things, and then after that have the joint meeting with Public Works and
select board.
So
that would be ideal and maybe be less costly, but anyway, so I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
But I think either if Stantec is ready, I don't see any reason why we couldn't try to set up a joint meeting. Andrea, would do you see any problem with trying to get Public Works to attend a regular TAC meeting, or should we negotiate about timing or evenings better?
You might have to figure out timing.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you're usually
Joint meeting
meeting.
and select board too, yeah.
We meet the second Wednesday of every month at 4 p.m. right here.
We could do that too,
Yeah.
like
The next
maybe tagging on to Public Works and
Yeah.
then inviting select board and then just having it posted as.
Okay,
Mhm.
so,
The next
What is the
meeting,
next one?
March 11th.
That might be a little too early. What is, it might be better.
So then
than-
in April, it's April 8th, but
We might have some.
yeah, I mean that it should be okay.
Okay.
But I mean, obviously.
Touch base with you on it
yeah,
and
and get.
Okay.
keep in the loop and-
so I think
and
it would be.
loop in the select board too.
I think it would be great to have it, have, other committees as well, because it touches on so many different areas in public works and engineering and policies related to select board and traffic and and regulations and things like that.
Income too.
Yeah, as long as we
Oh,
can
well.
see it, as long as we,
Not enough room.
as long as we can see it at a prior meeting
Yeah, I
of our
think
own,
it's
so we
important,
can.
I'm certain the pack itself see something.
Circulate some kind of, like a draft, maybe.
Yeah.
I just don't,
Yeah.
in terms of the amount of comments they can go for different drafts, we only have like a one draft.
Well, I mean, I guess, we don't have to, in my opinion is we don't have to. Ask them for a preliminary draft that we then comment on, but I think TAC would like to have.
To see it.
See it ahead of the joint meeting.
Definitely.
I'd put it
Okay.
this way, you want to make sure TAC understands.
Yes,
what's being
yes.
presented to the other
Yeah,
committees.
we can,
at the meeting,
that's
okay?
right, we would
Okay,
like,
that makes sense.
that's the way.
We can target that then. Yes, and so the other update on the transportation strategy is the summary of the public engagement workshops has been posted to the transportation strategy website, and Christine is gonna send out a link to everybody there. But it kind of summarizes all the input that Stantec gathered through the workshops in November. And there was, I think, over 200, there was 100 participants in the public workshops in person, and there was, I believe they said 400 comments on the online portion of the public workshop. So that's quite a bit of input, and they did a really good job summarizing kind of what the high level priority like input from the public was, kind of ideas behind the recommendations going forward for the plan. So I think, if you even look at that, that'll give you a sense of what might be coming out in the final plan as well. So
Okay.
we'll send a link out to that. The other thing I just wanted to mention is that this is on the public transit side of things. Concord has been invited to participate in a staff level discussion with the towns of Acton, Concord, Littleton, Maynard, and Sudbury next week on February 24th. This is a meeting that will be facilitated by MAPC, and this is part of their they're doing a municipal transportation needs assessment of all the towns related specifically to public transit. Acton has already started or has been running a public transit local program for quite a while. Melanie and I are going to be attending this, and Melanie will be the point person on this kind of moving forward, because the in Acton, actually it is like an intersection between health and transportation.
Absolutely.
And Melanie saw, and you can see this as well, but she saw that in her public needs, the public needs assessment for public health, that transportation came up a lot. So sort of see the intersection of the transportation and public health related to that. So that is on track for next week. And we're just basically trying to move it forward where we're not dropping the ball. And if there's grant opportunities and opportunities to partner with other towns, that we're like staying in the conversation, making sure Concord is, at the table and participating.
You have a question?
So
Just following up on that, the Acton program is Crosstown Connect, is that?
the Acton, but yes, it's Crosstown Connect, but they're actually looking into creating a new fixed route that would incorporate Maynard and potentially Concord as well.
Great. So is there any progress with respect to that initiative of, redoing the fixed route idea and incorporating Concord?
That's what we're working on.
That's what we're doing.
Okay, so that's actually, that's an action item.
Yeah, that's the action. That would be my-
Great. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Well, that's-
So,
So is that there?
So
I-
that map, MAPC meeting, so,
it's staff only, so it's,
yeah, when is it?
that's February 24th. That's next week.
That's great.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
And is the fixed route one that would be, if I think I read about this, what we include Emerson Hospital?
Yes,
Okay.
that's the idea eventually, is to include Emerson Hospital, and I mentioned that there is a desire also to not just go to Emerson Hospital, to connect into Concord Center
Oh.
too, so, you know.
Yeah, the various,
Now that you've opened that, is there any sense of what the budget would look like and how that would be financed?
Not at this point. The other thing that we've been looking at, and this came up at the TAC meeting last TAC meeting, was speed limits in town and maybe creating a type of map of all the speed limits. It is somewhat challenging, we have found with GIS, because we did an initial map with GIS, and Melanie, I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit more about that. Kind of opened up a little bit of a can of worms on that one. So,
I suspected
but
it.
we did take that into account and tried, and it may not be as easy as we thought. So we, I don't know, Melanie, you wanna
On the
talk about that?
mile per hour?
Yeah, the miles per hour.
Yeah, so we learned a lot that there's different data source versus state versus current in-town engineering plans. Sorry, that's just back to me. So we do have a map I did share with Phil, and then it needed some updates. And it's a bigger conversation than I thought, to have the detail and the speed limit changes, and it became a very involved project that I couldn't solve, I guess, in a short term.
How about the streets that have two different speed limits in opposite directions?
Right.
Those are
Yeah,
great.
well, it may be
Yeah.
because I thought about that. It may be because you're entering a busy area or you're in, I mean, if you're leaving a school zone, it makes sense
There's
to
the,
have one, and if you're entering the school.
what I learned is there's the state jurisdiction, there's our local regulation, there's which version. So we did generate a map with GIS but it needed a lot more input
Yeah.
and time. It's a whole project. to
Well, this
generate.
could be a crowdsourcing thing too, in terms of people.
Just post it.
Just post
We
speed
post,
limit
we
signs.
post a draft and people say, no, that's wrong.
think
I
this
do
is-
think it's important to have a snapshot of, I mean, if we're even talking about speeds, it's important to have
Yeah.
a snapshot of what's going on, where things are regulated, unregulated, when we say
Where
it's
speeds are
de
extended.
facto 25. I find it very confusing that to say it's 25 anywhere it's not posted, and then you go by a 35 sign and you go. When does it go back to 25?
Right.
You would think at some
That's
point it
exactly
would
the
go back to
problem I have.
25. So, and I want to mention too that Phil sent me a AI assisted preparation of some of the regulations. So maybe depending on how many other things come up at our next meeting or the next meeting,
Okay.
we can have a big discussion of this and put whatever we have on the table.
So just transparency, we just have to be careful. We're looking at the most recent version of the regulations.
Yes.
Because there are a number of versions of the regulations out there that are posted, and then that they aren't the same, and the
Yeah.
numbers are, to make another whole level, I learned.
Yeah.
There's a different,
Information to be questioned.
there is
Yeah.
like, what is the current data? And it's quite a bit of a project with GIS, and I have to see it.
Yeah.
We'll see what we can, if it's possible to create something before our next meeting.
We'll send you the envoy.
One,
Yeah,
one,
I've
one
actually sent
question
it,
to ask in that process is,
if-
how come Google knows?
Yeah. And so I just wanted to, just kind of loop it back to the transportation strategy, and just a thought that had occurred to me during the presentation on road safety is, this project is happening at the same time, obviously, as a road safety, kind of listing initiative or tool, whatever you would like to call it. And I'm thinking that, the transportation strategy is gonna probably lag behind this initial first year of prioritization. But you will have that plan for next year when you're looking at projects prior. So it's not as if it's gonna be we didn't have it in time. I mean, this is kind of speaks to the, I think the comment about people saying that this is such a static list and it doesn't move, but it's like, you don't have that overall plan and policy level that
Working on that.
that strategy
Yeah.
is going to
Okay.
hopefully bring that together and
Okay.
add that lens to it. So I just
Alright.
wanted to add that.
Thank you. I see online Karen has her hand raised.
Hi,
Could you identify yourself and?
hi, Karen Jordan, Upland Road. I just want to comment on the speed limit issue and the study that you're doing. One thing that should factor into this is the town does have a document that is the traffic and safety rules and regulations, and that was recently updated and approved by the select board in 2023. But that said, that document is problematic because it does list specific signs in town. For instance, on no right-hand turn or no left-hand turn, that nature that just don't exist and haven't existed for at least 20 years in some specific cases. So as part of this process, that document should be reviewed and updated.
So you're bringing up in a good example of what I discovered. When I started, I thought, oh, we'll put a map
So
together.
what is this? What is this? This, I mean, that's just a, well,
Well,
don't
she
you,
has
right?
good, there was a lot of errors in inconsistency between our, and
Yeah.
the town engineer was like, this is a comprehensive review. I can't just put a map together showing what's in that document, because it's gonna make a flood of. It needs to be reviewed with our current knowledge and insight internally engineering, and they just don't have the
So
capacity.
is there a posted document that supposedly says
Yeah,
where there are signs?
And that is a big problem because it's a new document. You know, that's a new document. The date on that is it was approved in 2023, but it is very, 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 very out of date. You know, so there's a process issue that needs to be addressed in this as well.
I recognize what you're saying.
Yeah.
Can somebody send that to me? I want to get some more things posted on the website.
Yeah, I have
More
it from-
eyes, more eyes.
So you want to post an inaccurate document?
Well, I'll say,
Oh,
but it's not, we'll put Phil will help you with the legal disclosure that
So
Just put a link.
mileage may vary.
I have it and I will send it to you.
Aggravation will be high though.
Yeah, I think it'd be nice to have that, just to show
All
them
right.
I want to acknowledge that you're deferring that topic on the.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Thanks. So the charge draft that Phil with Ellen's help was working on and stuff was not ready in time to post for the public and distribute to everybody. So that will be done today, and we'll take it up at the next meeting, and it'll be posted for the public to look at.
That was Dick, that was.
I will, business concluded. I will adjourn the meeting.